Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome to another edition of the Doctor's Lab with myself, Abdul Haqq Baker, and our dear brother, Dr. Khalid, brother Khalid Green. Assalamu alaikum, brother Khalid.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hayyak Allah. Good
How
to
are
be
you doing?
back.
Good to be
What?
back, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, good to be
And
back.
we have a subject today that I think, wa alaikum salam, brother Saqib. We have a subject today that is relevant from many perspectives. And I think we need to look at it from particular angles that are seldom discussed in these type of contexts. And brother Khalid, I'm going to be expecting you and asking and probing with regards to the religious context and everything, and then looking at some of the more practical aspects and contexts as well. Wa alaikum salam to our brothers and sisters who've just joined us. Sister Shirin, I've seen you're back there. Our other brothers I've just mentioned one of you, and the others who've just joined us today. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Sorry about the slightly late timing. Vigilant stranger. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Niyama. Wa alaikum salam rahmatullah. Good to see you back. And nectar of peace. Many. Fahima, all of you. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Brother Khalid, so now, Hijrah, idealism versus reality. Now, there are many narrations and scholarly edicts regarding Hijrah, the importance, the significance of Hijrah. However, there are practical challenges that many who have either considered, planned, and or embarked upon Hijrah have faced. And I think we need to look at those in the context of the evidences and the encouragement to perform Hijrah today. So before going into all of those, if you don't mind, I'd ask you to refer to some of the evidences, the adillah, and the scholarly edicts regarding the importance of Hijrah.
No. Yeah, there are many as far as the the evidences for Hijrah, the encouragement, or even the obligation to make Hijrah. From that evidence, it's always better to start with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and some of the scholars, they use this in light of all ibadah, and of course, this is inclusive of Hijrah. And they were not commanded except to worship Allah alone, and for Him the religion, is fully the religion, ikhlas. Because Hijrah, this is an act of obedience to Allah. It's an act of worship, so it requires sincerity, and we're going to get to that shortly. So that is the way that we look at that that general adillah, for example. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, Ya ibadiya alladhina amanu inna ardi wasi'atan fi iyaya fa'budun. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O my slaves, or O my servants, verily my servants who believe. Okay, He addresses the believers. Verily my earth is spacious, so worship me. So is that just saying the earth is spacious and just worship? Not exactly. It's letting us know this is a proof for Hijrah that the earth is spacious. If you can't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in one place, you worship Him in another place.
Right.
There is countless evidence. For example, one of the most important evidences that you see often used for Hijrah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna alladhina tuwaffahum al-malaika ظالمي أنفسهم قالوا فيما كنتم قالوا كنتم مستضعفين في الأرض قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها فأولئك مأواهم جهنم وساءت مصيرا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily those who the malaika have taken their souls, they have oppressed themselves. And then it will be said to them, قالوا فيما كنتم, what were you doing, or what? And they'll قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض, we used to be the weak and oppressed in the earth. And then قالوا, meaning the malaika would say to them, ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة, isn't Allah's earth spacious? Futuhajiru. That's the word they use. So therefore make hijrah in it. Verily, those are the inhabitants of Jahannam, and what a evil destination, letting us know. So some of the scholars use this for the wujub of hijrah, that, hey, the earth is spacious, especially if you can't practice your deen in one place, then you need to go and practice it somewhere else. And it shows that those people who didn't make hijrah, they claim that we were the weak in the earth. We were weak in the earth, and they failed to make hijrah. So that's kind of the shahid that they were punished for that. And so many ayat, and then from the hadith, which we absolutely have to deal with, because I think this is going to, for me, summarizes the crux of what we're going to be talking about, and probably a rebuttal to whatever you excuse me. So the Prophet ﷺ said, إنما أعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها وامرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه أخرجه. So this is a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ said, verily actions are tied to the intentions, and everyone should get that for which he intended. Therefore, he who migrates for Allah and his messenger, then he is migrated for Allah and his messenger. He who migrates to take some worldly gain, or to take some woman in marriage, he will get that for what he migrated for. That hadith right there really gives us a lot of insight, and there's so much to say, but just for our listeners, in case some people are not familiar with the term hijrah, there are different types of hijrah, but generally what we're talking about when we're talking about hijrah from a shari'i perspective is we're talking about intiqal min bilad kufr ila bilad islam. We're talking about leaving the land of disbelief to the land of belief, or the land of bid'ah to the land of sunnah, or the land of ma'asi to the land of salama, basically, a place of sinfulness to a place where there's less sin, or where there's, that strength of Islam. And another adillah that we absolutely have to mention in the context is, for one, the Prophet ﷺ said, La tankati al-hijra hatta tankati al-tawbah, wa la tankati al-tawbah hatta tatla' shams min maghribiha. The Prophet ﷺ said, hijrah will not cease until Tawbah ceases, and Tawbah will not cease until the sun rises from the west. Okay.
Now that for me is the most important. I know you said that.
Yes.
And
I want to say one more thing, because this shows us also the broadness, even from a shari'i perspective, of the concept of hijrah. So the Prophet ﷺ also said, al-muhajir man hajira ma naha Allahu anhu, that the muhajir is the one who leaves off what Allah has prohibited. So part of hijrah, and one type of hijrah, is leaving off sinfulness to, basically making tawbah and staying away from sin. That is a powerful type of hijrah. So if you're not able to make hijrah, out of from a non-Muslim land or what have you to a Muslim land, the most important thing is that you leave off sinfulness. All of us are required for this type of hijrah. All of us. That's wajib upon all Muslims. And we know the many stories. We know many people who have made hijrah and their kids turned out a wreck in Muslim lands even.
Right.
They were wreck. I mean, some of the stories, even I know in Jeddah and other places, wow. And Riyadh, and, kids, raised up there, and they were turned out. So much to say. We'll get into some of the ahkam maybe a little later. I'll let you chime in, and we'll keep it going back and forth.
I think it's very important to lay the foundation with all of the adillah and evidences that you've brought. Very, very important.
Yeah.
Because I want the participants, the viewers, to see the perspective and the significance and the negation with regards to hijrah. Now, Brother Khalid, you mentioned, mashallah, one aspect of hijrah you mentioned of leaving sin. Okay, from one place to leaving sin, and we've seen some individuals say that they left London for Birmingham, they left the UK for America.
Right.
They did those hijras with regards to, and the one sister saying that she's practicing her deen better in America since she's left the UK, possibly because of the environment that she's in and everything like that. And that level of hijra is still significant if you can't make what is the epitome of the hijras, moving from the land of Dal Kufr to the land of Dal Imam, Islam, Dal Islam. Now, there are practical challenges there, and you've alluded to some of them. And the question is, we are living in an age now where we have nation states. We're living in a time now where we have borders. Before we had the Muslim Ummah, it was porous. You could move across to different regions, Andalus, Syria, places like this. You can move to the Hijaz. It was under a khilafah. Okay, there was leadership there. There was movement that was permissible. We saw other faiths. We saw monotheistic Christians, and we saw Jewish inhabitants in the Muslim land seeking refuge there as dhimmis, as it were. Mm. Now we are living in a time where, when we move to a Muslim land, in particular regions, we have to get a residence visa and an employment visa. No. And our existence and residence in those lands is dependent upon us being employed and being required in those places of work, in those environments. And if we're married, if our wives aren't working, it's dependent upon the husband. And if the husband isn't working and he happens to come out with the wife because she has a skill and a profession, it's dependent upon the wife's residence and her employment visa. Everything is dependent upon that. Now, I remember having discussions with scholars when living in Saudi, and long discussions with students of knowledge that I was close to, sheikhs in their own right, in Saudi Arabia. And we went back and forth about the restrictions that are placed upon us as those who may have gone for Hijrah. Some of us didn't, because before I left, I was told that Hijrah, going to Saudi Arabia, for example, for Hijrah, you can't do Hijrah on a residence visa. Right. So then we were discussing aspects, another type of Hijrah of the heart. So while I made Hijrah of the heart, physically, I knew I'm employed here, and my existence and residence here is dependent upon me maintaining employment. No. The same in Dubai. Dubai now it's slightly different. You can buy property and then have a full status and residence visa, and there is nationality being offered to a few. No. So my question is this: how is Hijrah possible to these lands when those limitations and restrictions are placed upon the individual who is moving to such lands?
No, fantastic question. And something we've looked at, and discussed even personally. We've had this, and I even have your interview in my research about this. Also, my brother, Shakir McGill, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, who lives in Yemen, who's a muhajir in Yemen through all these wars and so forth, with the Iqama system as well. But anyhow, so there's a couple of ways in a couple of things when looking at this question. First, Hijrah has always been a difficult thing. Okay, Hijrah is always, even though the borders were porous for most of human history, for everyone, that still it came with difficulty in traveling. People died, people divorced because of it, people experienced sickness. One member becomes Muslim, one member leaves Islam. Things, all those challenges, the original Hijrah, all the challenges for the Muhajirin. And the original Hijrah, aside from to Medina, but also the Hijrah to Ethiopia or Habasha, all kind of challenges you can imagine. So it's always, one thing we have to remember, it's always laced with difficulty. Secondly, as far as the Iqama system and so forth, and you mentioned for those countries, well, it wouldn't necessarily be a shart or a condition that someone needs to go to those countries.
Right.
Indonesia, Gambia, Senegal. You know what I mean? The earth, as is mentioned in there, al-ard wasia. So the earth is wasia. Now we know that really the bottom line is with probably any state, for the most part, is they want you to contribute. You know, they want you. They don't just want you. We don't need the bums from such and such country to come and live and do nothing for our country and nothing for us. So you see that a lot of countries are putting those have those limitations and so forth. The only kind of exception, and I know that they want you to bring value, that I know for people of the African diaspora, especially from America, that Ghana in the 90s, I think during the Clinton administration or something, the president offers citizenship for African Americans. I don't know if that applied to other Africans in the diaspora, but to African Americans, and that still is something that's still kind of going on, you know, for Ghana and specifically. Now, Ghana is a non-Muslim country, but that would maybe be a better, you could maybe live a better Islamic life there than some other place, perhaps. So that's something to keep in consideration. So keeping that in mind, we know that the Iqama system and so forth, that those are barriers and challenges. And yes, you have a residency permit. So as far as how we like to look at Hijra, you know, those are challenges. And we say, man, what am I muhajir? We've known people who had less skills, you know, or skills that maybe they didn't have the same demand. I've known brothers who were living, you know, in Saudi Arabia, in Medina, because they love Medina. And I told this brother, I said, I couldn't do what you're doing. I'd just leave. I'd go back to America. But I love it here too, but I don't think I'm on your level. You know, he was living, you know, the working for the, you know, he didn't have a degree. So he's working for these companies, teaching English and, you know, getting fired here, and they hadn't paid him in 2 months there. And, you know, just crazy stuff, going through those hardships. Now he'll be rewarded for that if his intention is Hijra. And that, I think, is really the most important thing that we have to remember, is going back to that hadith, actions are tied to the intentions. So if you make, even to live in Saudi Arabia, I know brothers now who don't have their degrees still. I know 2 brothers that don't have degrees, still living in Saudi. Allah has opened up better jobs than they had before, but they know it's temporary. One, he is definitely trying to stay there as a muhajir, and he's went through all kind of struggles, been jailed, been, you know, all kind of crazy stuff has happened. But he doesn't want to come back to America. So, you know, I think there's you know, that is the sacrifice, and you'll be rewarded. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that he's going to provide. That they're going to find many provisions, but it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to get that, you know, that process of Hijra. It's not easy. All of those are obstacles. I've known people who've turned colors, lost 20 kilos, you know, all kind of sicknesses, especially living in Yemen and places like that, you know, and they were, of course, most of them are not muhajir, and some of them are not even Muslim anymore. But the point is that it is a tough and steep path, and you'll be rewarded for it. So even if the Iqama, because I've asked this question to like Sheikh Ibrahim al-Hayli, and I've heard it asked to other mashayikh, and he shut it down. I said, Sheikh, well, what about, he said, no. He said, you know, that's not, just because you can't get a Iqama, or your Iqama and this, the residency permit, nothing to do with your Hijra, because the bottom line is, it's that intention. It is going back to the intention, because your reward is with Allah. And there is some beautiful kalamas, some of the Ahl al-Ilm I want to bring about the fuqaha and how they kind of navigate this. That's actually very, very beneficial in regards to this issue and their ahkam about Hijra. So, so those are things we definitely have to keep in mind. And I've had this discussion. I had also another brother who you may know from the UK. I won't mention his name. Good beloved brother of mine who lives in Saudi Arabia still, in Medina. And we had these discussions. I said, well, what about the Syrians, man? You know, and they're going through this, and he just shut it down. But you know, I think there's a balance. You have to look at both sides, that yes, there is great difficulty. Your country's being blown up to pieces. But when you think about most of the Syrian refugees or Afghanis or others who take those trips, and Somalis and others going to Europe to try to get to America or to take residence in Europe, even from war and whatever, they paid thousands of dollars. They took debt. They actually had money where they could have actually started a business probably, which would have been better. Look at the one who, the famous picture of the Syrian father, his son washed up on the beach and he lost his son. It's a very poster child picture.
Yeah.
You know, may Allah have mercy upon him. And you know, he got divorced, I think, from his wife from that, or I don't know if the wife died or whatever. Very famous. But I saw a little short clip about his story now. He's remarried.
I am Kurdi. I am Kurdi.
Yeah. And so, you know, that his you know, now he's back to square one in Syria. But with the loss of his children, can you imagine your child, you know, being the poster child? You did all of that, you're full circle, you're back in Syria. And you're, you know, and he's working and doing whatever, trying to. So my point is there's a very strong wedge as well of being patient. Now every situation is different, but the reality is a lot of people making that perilous journey that we keep seeing ships sink and this and that and the other, they paid a lot of money and went into debt. And then some of them are slaves in Libya, and, you know, crazy stuff that happens. What a perilous journey in order to get that jinsiyah, in order to get that freedom, in order to whatever. And then even when they come, the disasters of many scenarios of losing your children. And who's going to receive them? Who has the money, the power, and the zeal? It's the churches mainly. You know, it's churches and those religious organizations. Muslims in general, we don't even have those kind of, we have some institutions like that, but it was just not on the near. No, it's not, it's incomparable. Okay.
Good. Okay. These are interesting points, Khalid, and the perspective you're coming from. But I would push back when we're discussing with regards to the refugees from the war-torn lands and countries where they are being oppressed.
Yeah.
Now, they are not looking and considering things from that perspective with the finances that they're spending and everything like that. And I can talk to this issue because I know I've got some very close Palestinian friends who live in Saudi, been there most of their lives, and they had family members in Syria, and some of the things that happened with regards to some of the females at the hands of Assad's army and everything, and one of his cousins coming back mute after they found her days later when the village had been ransacked by the army and everything, and the fact that the only way of escape for them who are already having or possessing refugee status was to get them out beyond. They couldn't come into Saudi. That wasn't happening for whatever reasons were there. They had to go to, they tried to get to Turkey. I think they were going to Greece, and beyond that to Italy. Now, so many of them who went in that direction had little choice because of the fear, because of what was being done, but to move in that direction. So the question is that a reverse Hijrah of sorts? Because the Hijrah is a land of the Muslims, or it's a land of safety, as you've given as an example. So I wouldn't say that those individuals going to Europe, okay, unless it was those who knew they could stay or knew they could move to another Muslim land. Those who went into Europe, I don't think that I would be critical of them in the heat of some of the circumstances they were facing, especially because I have personal experience through people that I knew, and I was watching what was going on and the finances they were raising, and they couldn't bring them in. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is some good examples you've given with regards to colleagues in Medina. But when you're in, does Hijra mean that you should face and be ready for, in some circumstances, a minority, I would say, not all, humiliation, denigration at the hands of the society that you're moving to? I'll give you an example. I was working director of a particular section of an institution that I was working with, and I was speaking to the CEO. He and I would sit, because I was a director over a section, he was running the whole institution, and it was in the place was in, I won't mention the organization, but it was on the way to Makkah. Very high-tech place. And so we were speaking, we had non-Muslims working with us. I had non-Muslims under me and Muslims. And he said this to me, and he confessed, I like calling Muslim converts because they're cheap and they're coming to be near near the Haramain, and you can do anything with them. Now he's saying that to me, not because he's saying it to me as though we were together. I'm a PhD holder, doctor, senior management, everything. But he didn't. He looked beyond that. I was a convert in Saudi Arabia, who he was paying quite an astronomical amount. But it was a fact that he, for some reason, moved me to the side, and
you're the exception. You're the
made me an exception and spoke about others in that particular way. And I didn't take too nicely and kindly to that, because I've seen others who would forego aspects of their honor in order to do this hijrah. And then there's another factor here. With hijrah, as I was heavily advised, strongly advised by the scholars we used to speak to as well, once you've done that hijrah, you cannot return to your land of origin or the land of the non-Muslims, except if it's very temporary, because that constitutes a major sin. It constitutes a major sin. Now, how many have come out to these lands, for example, and even the lands that are more accepting, like the Gambia brothers and sisters from my community in Brixton have done hijrah to the Gambia, Muslim country predominantly, mashallah, tabarakallah. But some have come, as you said, here, the Middle East. Sister Shireen is saying about Malaysia, very difficult to go through the visa process there, but once there, yes, you can settle. But how many have traveled with the intention of hijrah and ended back up in the land of their origin or the West, therefore falling under that, is it a religious edict of committing a major sin?
Yeah, beautiful. So much to say. Again, one of the things and that's why we laid that foundation, that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, again, you're rewarded by your niyyah. If you die, as was mentioned, and as we have narrations of the Prophet ﷺ mentioning about those who died, the man who killed 100 people, and then he was actually making hijrah. Going from one land to another, going to where the people who were the Salihin or what have you, and he dies. Yes. He's rewarded. Which one is he closer to? All of those nusus, they illustrate for us the importance of hijrah and that you'll be rewarded by your intention. So if someone is sincere and they go to Medina, because I know so many muhajirs and ex-muhajirs, I know some of even the more, and I generally tend to find that Americans are a little more longevity than the UK Brits.
Yeah.
Okay? I've known a lot of British, but they would come out, and do it, and even talib al-ilm wise, we got Americans that stayed in Damaj 20 years, some Brits, okay, maybe some of them got 8 years or, I don't know. But in general, you find that, again, it's that intention. So going back to the issue with the refugees, though, that again, Islam, the ahkam in Islam, they go with the ghalib. They go with the overriding thing. For example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ar-rijal qawwimuna ala nisa, men are the maintainers and protectors of women. Does that mean that there are no exceptions, that there are some women who might be in a position of, they have wealth and stuff, meaning not that they should be, that is their role, but, it goes on the ghalib. Mostly men physically are stronger than women, but we got some bad women who MMA fighters or whatever. You don't want to mess with what's her name? I forgot, out of Brazil. Anyway, the point is, so the ahkam in the Sharia is going on with the ghalib. So if you there may be scenarios for people, for a Syrian to go, a particular person from whatever place they're being persecuted. There, I just got out of the prison, out of Egypt, and they had already put things under my fingernails. I can't really use my fingers much, and the dogs were biting my genitals. Akramakumullah. Sheikh, can I make hijrah? You know what I mean? Or, and they're going to put me back in there. There are scenarios, and that should be reserved to Ahl al-Ilm. They need to take their particular tafsilat details, because a lot of people, like I said, there's a lot of people who have hardship, but they actually have wealth. that they could have actually started a business and stayed and remained. Yes, there's going to be those situations of, as you said, rape and pillaging. We know the horrors of what happened there. And I can't say what I would do if my children were, and if I was in that scenario or not, what have you. But in general, we see that what becomes quite problematic is that we see everyone is looking for that excuse of why not.
Right.
And we see the majority of the people, they didn't come for any Islamic reason. They came for freedom. Some of them, they came for, look at those Afghanis. That is amazing to me that they were clinging to the plane.
Yeah.
Clinging to the plane. How are you going to meet Allah? You were clinging to the plane. Oh, those who disbelieve in Allah, save me. Instead of on your knees, you'd have been clinging on your knees. Or the Taliban. I'm not a supporter of the Taliban. I disagree with their Aqidah and so forth. But you're clinging to a plane and you died. You died for the Hijrah to freedom and stuff like that. From an Islamic perspective, we need to reassess ourselves. And this is we need to go back to a reset. And this is where we see masses of people, most of our brothers and sisters, we can easily say from experience and probably crunching data as well, if we were to take samples and stuff. And of course, that requires going into that if we're going to be super truthful and honest. But we know that we could probably say 90%, 99% came for the dunya. And when you look at certain communities, there's people are professionals and had it well off. I know so many where I'm from in Seattle, Washington, they have the power now. Muslims, and especially from Indian, Pakistani Muslims, they have wealth and they're doing some good too. They're building some masajid. They have money. They can, when there's a cause, they can drop $5,000 like that from one person. Who's going to wait? Brother, is that all you're going to give is $5,000? I've listened to the imam raise like 80,000 on a Jumu'ah, like nothing. They're Deal Bundys, but he's just like, my dear respected brothers, with his Tabliki narrative, a way of presenting things. Who's going to raise? Boom, they got the money. So I'm not saying that there isn't side good, and there's immense good that our brothers and sisters who did, and the generations and the Muslims that come from that. That is the Sunnatullah Kawniyah. That is from,
right.
How Allah bless that good. But the asl is, you come into these lands for un-Islamic reason, just because you want a better Islamic situation. There's this requires scrutiny. That's what I'll say. It requires scrutiny, because there's no doubt the ulama have a lot of things, and I'll turn it right over to you. I just wanted to mention, anyway, I'll try to sum it up. Some of the aqwal you'll find, of course, from Salafi scholars. I don't know any Salafi scholars, and I haven't seen any fatwa generally where they say that that's jaiz, except those people coming for, as far as to stay and make hijrah or what have you, except those who are, maybe they are students of knowledge and they can maintain their deen. And generally the fatwa that you have from scholars in Saudi Arabia and some of the other places and where there's a lot of Salafi scholarship, you're going to find they have a more conservative view that, it's divided either between wajib and mustahab. It's recommended for you to make hijrah if you can practice your deen. If you can't practice your deen, it's wajib.
Right.
There's another taifa ulama, and I'm talking about qadim. If we look at the Manakish, we look at what the fuqaha were saying, the Malikiyya, the Shafi'iyya, and especially during particular times, you'll find some of them saying no hijrah to a non-Muslim land. It's absolutely haram.
Right.
So they say it's haram, and if you do, you're a sinner and you're staying there. Another group is in the middle. Then the third party actually made takfir of the people who, and I don't see that view, but there are some scholars who say that. And then we see also the extremist groups like ISIS and stuff. Of course, they're on that. The takfiris latch on to any way they can make takfir. They'll make takfir to you because my coffee is too, it's too much milk in it. So, we know that. But my point is that there's definitely different viewpoints, but it's a big mess. It's a big mess.
No, it's a huge subject. That's why I'm glad. No, that's fine. That's fine. And I'm glad that's why we chose to discuss this. And first and foremost, AH brother or sister, I'm not sure. No, I'm not related to Sheikh Abdullah Oduru from Yaqeen Institute. I don't know this individual, mashallah. Okay. Secondly, AH, you mentioned he mentioned the next point, Hassan, if you can put that up, me asking the question. So if you're making hijrah from a Muslim country where there's no justice, I think Brother Khalid's already indicated at the outset that if you're going to make, one of the reasons for Hijrah is to move from a place of bid'ah, innovation, to a place of sunnah. And so if there is no justice there, if there is, but you're moving to another Muslim land where there is perceived to be justice, because Brother Khalid has mentioned something very key, which a lot of Muslims use as a claim. That there is more justice and haqq in the land of the non-Muslims than there is in the land of the Muslims, and we've got to be careful how we are weighing those scales, okay? Because the pluralism that you get in the West enables you to do each and everything, the epitome of which is the reality and finality of which is you can lose your deen and it will be no problem there. And there is a drive for that against Muslims as well. We see that from those who came from Somalia. We see what's happened to some of the Pakistani diaspora with regards to their children, second, third generation. As Brother Khalid was saying, it's not for deen that they performed hijrah. So Khalid, coming back to, I think, some of the practicalities, this is a fascinating conversation, because we have lived in the Muslim lands. We have lived and are living. And again, I think it was one of the brothers mentioned, he's from the GCC, and from how could you bear to be in Dubai? Very, very good question. Having lived in Saudi and Jeddah for 18 years. And I would just say this and proffer this to the those who have that question to ask. Moving across to Dubai was a better reality. Vigilant stranger, that's right, thank you. He can't stand it for 2 days. Very good point, vigilant stranger. But like in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, anywhere you go in the Muslim countries, you can be exposed or expose yourself to whatever it is that you desire. So if you want to, and I'm not saying that you've had a problem, Vigilant Stranger. What you're saying, yes, Dubai is, it can be a very open and testing place for some if they are trying to avoid certain things and maybe their deen is at a particular level. But what I would say to you is this, brother Vigilant Stranger, having come to Dubai, I've actually become more active in the dawah, okay, here. New shahadas, khutbas in English, study circles, engaging with individuals and non-Muslims. And I say, while that may not be for everyone, that's there for some of us, because there are some brothers here and sisters very, very active in the dawah, and seeing in this society how people are being exposed to this, and seeing that it is a Muslim country, are embracing the deen. This is one of the very strong positives. And I'll say this again, Speed, you've asked me about myself. Moving across here is a better reality for me than moving back to London, the UK. Simple. Here I hear the adhan. Here I'm more relaxed practicing my deen. It's a Muslim country. Yes, I can practice my deen in the UK. Some may say, no, I prefer to go back to the UK. I prefer to go to back to America or whatever. As Brother Khalid has said, it depends on the individual. Strictly YouTube saying that it's the same as living in London. I'm from London. If you know the reality of London as I do, I'm not sure if you're from London yourself or the background that I come from, this is still a Muslim country. London is not a Muslim city. No. That's just long and short of it. Also, Makkah and Medina are much closer to me as well. I still have residence in Saudi Arabia, so I can jump across there as well, inshallah, as everything opens up again. So, again, strictly YouTube, our brothers and those who are asking, some would say, Jazakallah khair, strictly YouTube, some would say preference to be here than there. Some would say and you've got the Takfiri narrative as well, that they wouldn't want to be anywhere in the Middle East because of how they hold the rulers. So by default, they end up remaining in the West as though that's a better society and better climate. It's a contradictory narrative to have from the Takfiri perspective. But sadly, we have some from mainstream Islam who have a disdain for anything Middle East Gulf rulers. So they will hold that position. You've got those who would remain in the West because of this resentment that they have in their chest with regards to the Muslim lands. And they have to check themselves. We have to check ourselves. Because as you said, again, going back to that hadith, and it's the very first hadith in Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, actions are judged by intentions. So it does come down to the intention. Khalid, having said that, yes, Anis, I'm glad you agree with me. It's a very testing place, but we can be focused, and it can be, therefore, you can change that to become a very blessed place if you're focused. And I believe that in the circumstances that I'm living at the moment, and I know there are others who are living similarly, and mashallah, benefiting from the many fruits there are here and there are in the other Muslim lands, mashallah, tabarakallah. So Khalid, looking at this now, this can go on for a few episodes. We've got to move it on to, I know you weren't vigilant stranger, mashallah, don't worry, I know you weren't judging, alhamdulillah. Yes, those who don't do dawah, it comes down to their existence here as well. And many are coming here. And very good point, brother. Again, the niyyah, the intention is so, so important. So, for example, brother Khalid, those who have made it to the Muslim lands, the more affluent Muslim lands, whether it's Hijra that they've come for, or it could be, I've come to live within a Muslim society. I've come to live in with a Muslim society, raise my children in a Muslim society, but I'm not calling it Hijra because of these limitations that are actually there, okay? Many have done that, and some of the shuyukh even advised to do that and have that Hijra of the heart, as we were, the brothers I was with, sitting with the student of knowledge from Saudi, advised that of us. And so I adopted that. When I first came out, it wasn't Hijra. It's okay, I can't do Hijra, so just getting my family out to be in a better environment. And I thought, okay, I've got to make some conscious decision. So it was Hijra of the heart. And you can have Hijra of the heart even if you're living in the West. But my point is this now, or my question, my observation, as you've mentioned, similar to what happened to those who left Muslim lands to go to the UK. And the intention wasn't for worship. We see the results of what's happened with their children. No longer practicing Islam, away from the deen. That reality is one which many have faced living and raising their children in the Muslim lands. And if the children have not come off the deen, for all of us, we ask Allah to keep our children on the deen, many have adopted a diluted understanding and practice of the religion.
Many of who? The
the
ones in the West, or the ones in the
ones in the Muslim lands.
Okay.
Their children some have come off the deen. You and I know stories of that. Others have a totally diluted understanding of the deen, to the extent not wearing hijab, not praying. They're like some of the common folk or the youth of the society that they're living in, and in some cases worse, because they see they have a duality of identities, and the identity where they come from is a non-Muslim identity. So they want to be much more liberal and more in tune with the West while they're living in the Muslim lands. We've seen that as well. You've got, I remember seeing some young African-American boys who grew up, raised in Saudi Arabia, and they adopted the gangster look and the music and everything, and they didn't even know, they won't know what a gangster looked like if he came up and bit them on the nose. But it was the movies, it was African American, it was the what was swag at the time in the society that they were in. You had some of the young ladies trying to emulate some of the stars from America, from the UK, and showing similarities to them and saying, yes, this is where we're from. Yet they were only raised in a Muslim society, Muslim household, Muslim environment. So this is one of the fruits, risky fruits, I would say, but we cannot say that is specific to Hijra. that can happen to anyone, anywhere, anytime. What would you say to that?
I would say, again, we need to look at the ghalib, what majority and what the general things, your chances of your children being on istiqamah and having a good foundation is much, much higher, especially in a land of the Sunnah, a place like Saudi Arabia and stuff, than it is in Seattle, Washington, in New York, in Hull, England, in Croydon, in Birmingham. The chances are much higher of success, and I believe the success rates, are much higher. So looking at all those negative exceptions, again, a lot of times what happens is parents bring older kids over. Maybe they want to make hijrah, they want to do talib al-ilm, they go to Yemen, they go to places where the kids are already, you're already in the high school. You pull a kid out of the high school, and then he's all of a sudden in a fishing village in Yemen. That's not always going to be that successful. His view is not that view. So there's that issue. Even if they're raised there as children, one of the things I was thinking as you were mentioning that is so important is tarbiyah. Always, whether you're in a Muslim land or non-Muslim, because there's also very successful examples that happen in the West too. I know brothers who said they didn't practice when they lived where they're from, in Eritrea or wherever. And then now in Seattle, he's, istiqamah, he's a part of the masjid. Yeah. There are those cases. There are those cases. There are those exceptions. So we're not talking about this is the answer. Everything is so black and white. But we are saying that you always have to have that tarbiyah, because there's a lot of people, they go to Muslim lands and they don't even think about necessarily the tarbiyah of their children. So they could be in a blessed environment, but they're not teaching their children. They're not giving their children the dosage of goodness that they could be learning. They might be only concerned with themselves and neglect their family. There's all kind of various scenarios.
That's a good point. There's a good point you've made there. Then there could also be, which we've seen, an overdose of the tarbiyah, where the children have just said, we don't want this. And we've seen cases where
one thing is so important, I think, with children in general, is you have to teach them to love Islam. As a young child, you need to teach them the love of Islam. It's not that they have to know, like, for example, a place like Yemen, especially I'm familiar with the Salafis in Yemen. They're pretty hardcore. They're going to, their children won't see a TV. Their children won't, I'm talking to the Yemenis more so, and probably even the Westerners and others who go there. They cut off, and they're very, they don't go to public schools. It has to be a Salafi madrasa, and it has to be, so that's not always going to, the end result is not going to be necessarily the perfect Muslim. It could be someone who, it's not like they're always getting to learn the love of Islam. Now, there's a lot of khair that comes out. Absolutely. And I'm not criticizing, but I'm just saying the point is why it's so important to teach your children to love Islam. And I'll give you some example in some of our communities, and they know all around the world that they're really good in, they have the tahfidh of Quran. Now, if you were to take a sample, let's go to Seattle area. Seattle's nice enough, big enough city, and in that area in Washington State, we have a few good tahfidh, some big ones. And if you were to look at the percentage, and you could easily probably gather the numbers of those graduates that memorize the Quran, you would find a high percentage of them. They memorize the Quran, they don't know much about Islam, and they are in prison, in gangs, in borderline jail, the sisters in the different things. They're whacked out because a lot of times some of our elder communities and stuff like this, and traditional communities, they focus on just that external, memorize the Quran, and especially memorizing the Quran. Certain communities, you got to memorize the Quran, and then that's it. They don't really pay attention. Okay, there's more to the deen. That's just the part of the asas and a part of that process, but they need to learn their Islam and learn to love Islam. I remember once, and that was the first time I ever met a Pakistani non-Muslim. Actually, I haven't met that many, but I've met a few anyway through my journey. But she said she grew up, I don't know if she memorized the Quran. She said, my parents used to force me and this and this and this. And she said, you know, I'm a Christian now. I said, what? You know, and that was before I went overseas. So I was having this discussion. I was like, what in the world? What happened? You know, and I said, that's because you didn't know Tawheed. They never taught you really Islam. You were just getting forced. Maybe you're getting hit to memorize the Quran and whatever. So it's very important teaching the children as far as tarbiyah to love Islam. A point I want to mention about one of the comments, and then I'll switch it back to you. You emphasize something very important, the signs of Islam. So even the worst, more or less, Muslim country, even if you were to go to Syria, there's places now that they are semi-thriving. Not every place is under, you know, that they're bombing and stuff like this. Even Sunni areas that they're buying and selling. They might even be back in school. You know, they have a lifestyle that they've become accustomed to. Okay. Life goes on. They pay rent. They collect rent. The rent, you know, it might be difficult, inflation, and it's not the ideal situation, but they love their country and they love, you know, this is home. I know what, you know, in Yemen, it's more diverse than what the BBC or whoever gives us that, you know, what's going on there. So as you mentioned, those signs of Islam, the Adhan in Dubai, distinguishes it from all the non-Muslim countries, basically.
Right.
You're not, you know, except for some places like Ethiopia, you know, places in the non-Western world where you can go to places and villages and whole towns and provinces, which are practically Muslim provinces, basically Muslim villages. You can go to those many places. So, but mostly in the West, it's confined, it's in the masjid. And, you know, you don't have the signs of Islam. And if you are in a place where it's not populated, like where I'm at now, no Muslims. I don't see any Muslims. And I told you already, the masjid that is in the little town I live in, they only open for Jumu'ah. And I've never stepped foot in it because we have a little Jamaat sometimes at work. That's it. I don't even see Muslim. That is a killer of the heart. Now, I could be in a bigger city, but this is where I'm forced to because of work and the financial situation. So it's nothing still like living in a Muslim country. And I would be careful, my brothers and sisters, those people who always take the so-called Muslim countries. But yeah, you live in Dar al-Kufr. Sometimes you live in Dar al-Harb practically. You live in, you know, oh, but my good President Trump or my good President Biden really loves us. And Obama, he really loves us. My great leader, you know, but yet you got to you're making takfir of King Salman or whoever. Come on. Where's your reality? And where's your Islamic tasawwur? Make an Islamic tasawwur. You know, it's not going to be perfect on earth. And this kind of comes to the crux of our topic when you said idealism versus reality, that we also know there's no Jannah on earth. No. But we tried it, like I said, and I've traveled a lot. I haven't traveled as extensively as I'd like, but I've been African. I've been to many Middle Eastern countries, and I've lived in a few of them. And I've been to Asia only as far as Indonesia. I've been to Indonesia. And what I will say is nothing on the planet Earth even begins to approach the Islamic life. If you want to live an Islamic life, to Saudi Arabia. No, nothing. I don't care. Make takfir all you want. Make your crazy comments all you want. Sit behind your pulpit all you want. Nothing is comparable to the Bilad al-Tawheed, where it's actually taught. Usul al-Thalatha is in the curriculum for the children. Doesn't mean everyone's perfectly practicing. Doesn't mean there's no Saudi apostates. No, that's not what it means. But the point is, there's no comparison. And this is something you see from the reality. And you see this from the nusus, from the text. And you see this from the nusus of the fuqaha, the text of the scholars of fiqh. Why do they always talk? It's about when you live with the Muslims, you're making the Muslim land stronger. Okay, you live in a non-Muslim land, and you think you're doing a halal job, but your job is actually to study and spy on the Muslims. Or, you know, I'm giving an extreme example. You know, hopefully you're not working for the intelligence services. But my point is, you know, your factory, you're making bombs to blow, you know, kill, you know, whatever. There's some contribution. And if it's a direct contribution, it's even more problematic. you know, you're in the military and this and that. Oh, you got to go. You're stationed in a Muslim country, and war broke out. You need to quail this. You need to pick up arms. So my point is even with all the shortcomings, yes, the lack of freedom in many respects, and all this stuff in a Muslim land, it's still, in general, it's better for your Islam. In general,
And
it's a general statement. Doesn't mean there's many exceptions. Okay, you don't like to say go to Indonesia. Oh, Indonesia has too much fitna. If you can go to Saudi Arabia, try. If you can't go there, Kuwait. Maybe you can go, or maybe you can go to a poor Muslim country or a place where you can practice your deen better. Maybe you go to Gambia, maybe you go to Senegal, maybe you go to Ghana, which is a non-Muslim country, but the Muslims are very strong and they're not oppressed and they can do dawah, and it's better Islamic and traditional life, because the traditional life there has less fitna than being in Seattle, Washington, or New York, or Baltimore, or whatever. And
I want to chime in there, Khalid. Now, so you've mentioned African countries, and mashallah, some of our brothers, some of the conversations I have with some of the brothers in the UK from my community, they're looking towards Africa because they're seeing that some of the experiences that they've had or what they've seen in the Middle East, that they're not as welcomed, even though they've gone there Hijrah or to try and go and live there, even if it's not Hijrah. So they're talking about the African countries. And this is not just for people like yourself and me. This is not just for black people. There are others who've gone there and they've been welcomed, because that is a continent, by and large, that is very, very welcoming. You've got Lebanese who've set up and have been there for decades. You've got Saudis. When before the wealth hit them, I know Saudis who were born in Ethiopia, and they came, were invited back by the government. Now come back. We want you to contribute. So African
the wealthiest businessman. On another note, the wealthiest businessman, it's like a Bill Gates or whoever you want to talk about now in Ethiopia. His name is Tajuddin. He is he's half Saudi and half the Ethiopian. Go ahead on another note.
Yeah, mashallah.
But he has a lot of.
So that's something for consideration, in that they're much more accepting. But one of the things that we need to look at as well, we are in a time here, even when there was Hijrah yesteryear, as Khalid mentioned, they contributed to the societies they moved into. They contributed. This is one of the things that we saw as a mechanism for spreading the dawah as well, and how Islam spread across the earth in that way. So we should be looking at other regions like Africa. But as Khalid said, and I'm going to speak as one 18 years in Saudi Arabia, mashallah, tabarakallah, still have my residence there, still got children there now. The tranquility you feel living in a land where there's a uniformity of creed, there's a uniformity of religion. Not everyone there may be on the adhering to the exact practice of the country.
Not necessarily, Chaz. Not necessarily, Chaz. May Allah forgive us in you and bless us in you. But not necessarily going to the place where your parents are from. And we can talk about that in detail. Go ahead, doctor.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, that's the coffee kicking in, and this is your subject, mashallah. I'll let you come back in a minute, Khalid. But what the point I'm making here is that the fact of being in a Muslim country, and I'm going to speak from a Muslim perspective now, a convert perspective. Those of us who embrace the deen, it's a desire to move into the lands of the Muslims. And those of us who've managed to do it for whatever period of time that we've done it, overwhelmingly, again, depending on the intention, it has been a transformative process to live in an environment where your practice is actualized. And I'll go back to my cognitive development framework, Khalid. You've cited it in your PhD. You know what I'm speaking about here. Because living an abstract understanding of the deen is not the same as an actualized understanding. Yeah. When we're living an abstract understanding, that's where the idealism comes in. And we practice that idealism sometimes when we're living in the West, thinking, no, it's going to be like this, it's going to be like that. And then some of us moved into the Muslim lands, whether we went for Umrah, Hajj, we went to stay for a short while. And we then started initially looking down on the inhabitants of this Muslim society, thinking they're not practicing like the Sahaba, we're more practicing than them, when in reality, we then had to have a dose of humility, become humble, because as we settled, we saw no, Islam is pervasive across all of their lives in the way that they address you, the way they engage, the manners that are there. The whole society has for generations, for centuries, been practicing Islam, maybe at a rudimentary level, and there are different levels of individuals practicing. You hear them speaking to you in a particular way that you won't hear in the West.
Yeah.
Khalid, when one of my daughters, newborn for my ex-wife, died, and I was in a daze. But the way that the people were, the words, Allah, Rahmah, Dua, everything like this. Whereas when I remember when we were in the UK, and another one of my friends, and you know him, student of knowledge, from Medina, when one of his children died, and a lot of us turned out to go and bury, but you were in a land and it just felt cold, it felt barren, it felt when you was burying the child, it was just there's an emptiness. Whereas when you were in a Muslim land, the actualization of the deen is a reality. And
which Islamia, it's a Islamic
if anyone's going to take anything from this, no matter what society it is that you're living in of the Muslim lands, the fact that there's that actualization, that comprehensive absorption that I am in a Muslim society. Yes, you may have non-Muslims living around you. I live in the UAE, I'm living in Dubai. But you know what? When I'm walking through the mall, yes, I'm getting something here. I'm walking in the area that I'm living now, and you've got maybe pipe music playing in the background because it's high-end living. But then it comes to prayer time, and the adhan rings out everywhere. As a convert, what that does for the soul is irreplaceable. You cannot fathom that in the Western context. If you've got the adhan on your phone, comes to prayer time in the West, it's not the same. If you go into a masjid and hear the adhan being called in the masjid when you're living in the West, it's not the same. When Eid is celebrated in the Muslim lands, the whole country stops.
Yeah.
The whole country is embracing and celebrating Eid, Ramadan. I'll say this as well. I don't know any country that does Ramadan like Saudi Arabia. That's why in the 18 years I lived there, I never left except in 2015.
Yeah.
Yes, Chaz.
I want to deal with Chaz, and if you go ahead.
I will as well. Yes, Chaz. There is Arab racism, okay? I didn't experience it that much, alhamdulillah. Allah knows best why. Maybe the circles I moved in and everything like that. But I knew wonderful Muslims, Arabs. I knew some not so wonderful, but they were not colleagues of mine. Maybe my children to varying degrees, who come from different mothers. Maybe they experienced it maybe a little more than me in the schools and everything like that. But I will put this. Racism is not the defining feature of the societies that we are speaking about. Whether it's in the African continent against non-Africans, or it's in the Arab continent, peninsula, against non-Arabs. But let's talk, Chaz, wherever it is you may be from, I'm not sure, and others. What about the systemic, institutionalized racism that pervades Western society today, even now? What about that racism that is ingrained in the system, and you cannot bring any religious dictate, you cannot bring anything with religion to this system, because in actuality, they've used religion in their distorted terms with Christianity to be the undercurrent initially, not now, that built this infrastructure. Then we get into eugenics. Then we get into the Ham and story of Ham and Noah and everything. So what I'm saying really is that the oppression or the racism from one land to another, especially if you're facing it from Muslims, you know that's not a reality of Islam. It's present and it needs to be addressed, but it's not a reality, and it's antithetical to Islam. This is a very, very important factor to make, and that shouldn't detract from, again, what Khalid has said in the beginning, the niyyah for why we may do Hijrah, why we may perform Hijrah. as I said, Khalid, there are all those limitations that and restrictions that are around it. For example, me moving across, when it got to a stage where we were being taxed on everything. I mean, each child you were being taxed. It quadrupled over 4 years. Even the Arabs who lived in from different countries, Yemen and everything, they moved out of the lands and everything like that.
Of course.
For us as converts, we don't have a Muslim land to go back to. The Yemenis had Yemen to go back to. The Pakistanis had Pakistan to go back to. The Sudanese had Sudan to go back to. And that's a reality that they can move back to a place which is the land of the Muslims. Whereas for us, we move back to the West.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you maybe go to another country where you can practice your deen better. Like, just depends. Yeah. Some of the people, so there's a lot of stuff that's come up. One of the things, racism is everywhere. You're going to have different gradations of racism. There's going to be places where you could get lynched. There's going to be places where people might call you a black slave or a white whatever, or this and that and the other. Racism everywhere. Okay. Part of that hijrah, making hijrah, where you're going to be comfortable in practicing your deen. Okay. As we kind of talked about that, we kind of gave some of those points as foundations that maybe you can find yourself practicing because you've had negative experience. Many people I know, if my only experience had been negative, a few experiences in Saudi Arabia, which I experienced, I saw other people being, I had students. This is a real story. And I'll quickly do it. So anyway, one of my students was with one of my colleagues who was a non-Muslim, who was very close to Islam at the time. He never became Muslim. But anyway, he told this to me, and he told me which one of our students said this. And I know that student was very tribal. So they were going by the park. He said, "Oh, teacher, look at the animals." He said, "Where? Were there animals at the park?" He said, "No." And he pointed, and there was Bengali workers. They were cleaning the park. And then, you know what he told me? He said, "If this is how your Muslim brother talks about his own Muslim brother, then," and I said, "Listen, I was trying to almost kind of be the Muslim apologist or whatever, or, hey, Islam is not like that. It's against racism and stuff." But my point is I've experienced some ugly things, especially in Yemen as well, and especially in the north, but nothing that threatened me or anything like this, but, ugly racism. You're going to find that. But the ghalib, as you mentioned, the culture of Islam, I know plenty of people. I know brothers who have died. I know a couple of brothers who died. They were muhajirs, one from New York, and my beloved Habib Ali Compton Clark from Compton, California, straight out of Compton. Allah yarhamahu wa yaskinuhu fi jannat na'im. And their families were totally taken care of by their jobs. And they were just English teachers. Took the landlords, the rent. Okay, don't worry about it. And actually another American brother who passed with the COVID as soon as it came, his family remained in Saudi Arabia, his wife, and, because it's a Muslim culture and, those unique cultural values to the Saudis, that's very Islamic. They took care of them, took care of the burial, just tick off the list of the things of the khair. Of course, in the West, you can experience that, but it's just not the same. It's not the same. Who's going to give your family a salary maybe so just take your time. I know this is a difficult time for so many months. Don't worry about your your residence permits. We know lots of stories like that. And lots of times I used to live in a place called Hayal, a small place. And when I was new there, I was very strange because, for one, being an African-American or being American, period, and my thobe was very short, not like the Saudis and stuff. And word got around, he's Salafi and he's going to this sheikh. And I didn't have a car, so I'd walk. I would have people pick me up almost daily, and because Hayal is known as to be the most generous of places. Ahl Shemer, they're the people of Karam, generosity. They like take me to, I'm going to the bookstore. He'd take me, he would not let me pay for a book. I'd get this book, Sahih Bukhari, this Shar, this thing, and the money's already in the counter. It's like, what? No, Ustad, no, Doctor, no. They would, the generosity, the feed, I was new there every day, massive feasts as a new to Hayal, one of my students. And you know, and he also, you know, they were wealthy family, and they just, you know, my point is as you mentioned, the signs of Islam, the urf, the customs of Islam. If I was in Pakistan, if I was in India, Afghanistan, or even India, probably in parts where there are Muslim society, you're going to have many positive Muslim customs, as well as traditional things and bid'ah and aqi. We're not talking about that necessarily, but we're talking about especially just the urf, traditional, because the Muslim societies are all mostly very traditional in some form or another, whether you're in Egypt, whether you're in whatever, Afghanistan, Pakistan, doesn't matter. You know, the Afghanis, they're going to look after you, man. They don't play about their guests. That was one of the things with bin Laden and stuff. They take, you know, that's a big thing for them. That's their part of their izzah and their honor, which is well known with the Bedouins.
And I want to highlight, you know, as well, Khalid.
And so let me finish real quick. So that's what I'm saying about the Islamic signs and the Islamic culture, as you were mentioning. And yes, there's racism. Yes, there's challenges. Yes, you might see, I saw somebody drunk out of 10, 20 years. I saw one time. Yes, you're going to see stuff like that. Yes, you're going to see oppression. You're going to see, I've seen the police and I've seen people beating, and maybe a little racism, but also because the guy was drunk. So the Yemenis were beating him up. They didn't play. This was the Awam. The Awam got around this guy, and I was almost stupid enough to try to defend him because I was like, oh, why are they beating that Somali up? Because he was drunk. You drunk. The guy in the restaurant came out, hit him in the head with a tray, like not like a big tray, but like a light tray, bonk. And they was just going, my point is the Islam. And that should be the way we're looking at it. It should be Islam. Now, it doesn't mean Islam is practical. So there's going to be exceptions. There's going to be scenarios, and you're going to experience challenges. It's going to be la-di-da land. You're going to go to Saudi Arabia. They're going to open the doors. They're going to give you a gold bar and say, make Hijrah here. No, you're going to have challenges. Maybe you can live there. Maybe you can't. Maybe you need to look for something else. Go to somewhere else. That's why we read the verse. In the ardi wasia, my earth, my planet is spacious. The earth is spacious to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Go to where you can practice your deen better. We should always be looking to that one way or another. And also the hijrah we mentioned, as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, the hijrah min ma'asi ila ta'a. It's the hijrah from sinfulness to obedience to Allah. And that's what we should be doing wherever you are. I don't care if you're in New Mexico. I don't care if you're in New York. I don't care if you're in Texas. I don't care wherever you are. London, Dubai, you should always be focused on trying to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right. Jazakallah khair, Khalid. And before we conclude, Chaz came with a point, and I can speak to that point. He's saying, having faced racism in the UK, he'd want to make sure that he moves to a place where he will not face racism. Now, Chaz, I'm one who's from the UK, and I went to Saudi, and I was there in Saudi for 18 years up until last year, and we'll be back there inshallah. But I'm here at the moment here, and it's also, there's some points that we need to look at, Chaz. I'm glad that you've raised these points here. You might move to, I'm not sure, I'm seeing your picture, I'm not sure what your background is, but you may, let's say, I assume you're South Asian. If I'm wrong, forgive me for the not knowing where you're from, please do confirm. But if you move to another South Asian country, for example, and I know that there's, for example, there's rivalry between the Bangladeshis and the Pakistanis. So the point of the matter is it's everywhere, and they're two Muslim nations. They're two Muslim nation states. Now, if you're going to face racism in the UK and you're going to face racism in Saudi Arabia or a Muslim country, you have a mizan on which to refer to the Muslims who are showing you racism. You have a mizan, you have a criteria. In a non-Muslim society, you only have what is there from a UK statute legislative foundation that you can appeal to. And as we can see, when you've got the leaders who are racist in themselves, when the institution in itself is racist, you're appealing, the appeal is falling on deaf ears. We've just seen the case of this footballer Zuma, who did a barbaric thing by kicking the cat. But we're seeing the uproar that's there specifically because he's black. And we see that there's no uproar when we see the heinous racism and lynchings of black people. We do not see the same thing and the same uproar when it refers to a human being when it comes to a cat. This is the scales that we're dealing with in the West, okay? And both of them are heinous, but one is a human and one isn't. I'm not belittling what the cat is, but we've got different scales that we've got to be balancing here, okay? You've got Prime Minister giving the sanction, the green light that to bring the animals on the plane to from Afghanistan to the UK, where there were Afghanis who they said no, bring the animals, leave the Afghanis. So what I'm saying is this: racism is pervasive across many societies, but there's something else we've got to look at as well. And I'm going to say this as an Afropean, as I like to call myself. If we have self-assuredness in who we are as Muslims, when I move around in any society, I have that gown of being a Muslim, but I'm aware of and strive for being a Muslim, but there's also black excellence there if someone's going to question my complexion. If they want to go so far, I'm not going to have that apologist, pacifist approach to, oh yes, and us black people. No. I'm a confident Afropean black man. And we need to be confident in who we are with the cloak of Islam around us while we're doing that. And Jazakallah, I've heard your Iranian Sunni brother, mashallah, tabarakallah, and I'd say to you, yes. So I hope that helps, Chaz, in, you may not agree, but racism, as Khalid and I have just said, is pervasive everywhere. Would I rather the racism in a land of the Muslims, or would I rather the racism in the land of the non-Muslims? It shouldn't happen, and it's crude. It's much more crude when it's coming from the land of the in the land of the Muslims, because they should know better. They should know better. But that shouldn't be something to detract us. Again, it comes down to the niyyah and the reason why we are going to be in a Muslim land, if it's Hijrah, if we're over there because we want a better environment. And Khalid, I want to conclude on this and let you touch upon this as well. With regards to our children, I want to ask this question. If we've got children and we're making that journey, many individuals moved and they were doing Hijrah idealistically for themselves. As you said, in some circumstances, the individuals only thought about themselves. They didn't pay any attention to the children. And so if we do Hijrah, if we are moving, as some brothers said to me when they realized they had problems with their children, I realized I only did Hijrah for me. I only did Hijrah for my wife and me. I didn't do Hijrah for my children. I didn't take into consideration. They may have gone into Yemen, where meat is a rarity, as I know. You eat meat once a week, as you said, no television, nothing. And it was a culture shock for the children. What seeds were being planted at that point there? Had they maybe considered, I'm not just saying Yemen per se as an example, that's just an example. Had they considered the transition that their children would need to make? Because the children are not at the same level as us. We have to lead them, but they're not at the same level as us. And particularly with social media now and the pull of social media and the distraction of social media, if we're honest, not all of us can control that with our children.
Yeah.
If we are not making Hijrah comprehensively, including our children, then we are setting ourselves up for a very difficult scenario later on.
No, I think, again, this is something I tell people a lot of times because people ask about Hijrah and stuff. And I say, think out what you're doing. Not discouraging you at all, but I want you to know about reality of Hijrah, meaning the challenges. Don't think it's a la-di-da thing. You're going to show up, you just have a passport, you got 6 children, and you're going to show up in Saudi Arabia and they're going to open up the door, or Pakistan or Bangladesh or whatever, and you're just going to be paid for or something. No, you make preparations. As we see is from the deen, tawakkal ala Allah, i'timad ala Allah wa fi'l asbab. When you tawakkal, you rely on Allah, you're putting your faith and trust in Allah, and you're making effort. you're making effort to achieve whatever it is. So whether that's hijrah or what have you. So I just try to give people a reality that it's not la-di-da. Yeah, I've experienced racism. Yeah, I've experienced this. Yeah, there's difficulties and there's challenges. And if you have children, thinking about that, because when you stay overseas for a long time, you realize you grow and you realize the reality of that society, the reality of your permanence there and so forth, your residency and what have you. And you also think about your children. Well, what's left for my children? Saudia has some very strict laws that they kind of push. Now, some people are able to get around that if you know the right people or whatever, but your children at a certain age, they got to be off your iqama. So they have to then find their own way to get residency there, or they got to leave. And if they're children and they have no way in the West, you may have to leave with them. And I know a lot of brothers from the UK and America and Canada and everywhere who had to go back to the West because of that, and as you said, that realization. So it's always good to think about those things, think out things, and realize that it's a steep path. And I'll end as I said, one of my brothers, a close brother to me, who's lived in Yemen now 20 years. He's been through every war that you've ever read about in the past 20 years in Yemen, and he's still there. He says he's teaching Arabic to Indonesians right now, many advanced Arabic books he's teaching. He used to be a backpacker, a white revert brother. And, his wife is Yemeni, his children, they're Yemeni. They're not thinking about, they don't even have passports, I don't think. But, it takes a sacrifice where he's seen so many of his colleagues, some of them die, but some of them, most of them go back to the West after living in different places and going through wars. And because of the, go back to America, go back to wherever, because Yemen's in a civil war. So, there's challenges. We have to realize there's challenges. It's not paved with gold, but living in the Muslim country, in a place where there's peace and stability, inshallah ta'ala, and where you could have some sort of prosperity, there's khair alim. It is so much good compared to living in the West. And a lot of times, even if you live well in the West, your children is also another issue. Children being raised totally in the West. We know count more stories of people losing their children in one form or another, whether it's to atheism, whether it's to, whatever, to homosexuality, to everything, compared to the success. We know way more those, the people who lost their deen. So that's what I'll end on. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil.
Ameen. And I'll tell you, look, Khalid, what I'd say, mashallah, just briefly, alhamdulillah, again, we've spoken about looking at other regions, okay? Because I'm seeing, alhamdulillah, in the footnotes that some think this is pro-Saudi. No, it's not pro-Saudi. We're talking Hijrah. And because I've lived there 18 years, so I can speak about that reality. I've traveled to various parts. I've even been to Kazakhstan. And Muslim, predominantly Muslim country, mashallah, tabarakallah. When I was there, I think I was the only black man in Kazakhstan. Allah knows best. But when they saw I was Muslim, they were welcoming European Muslims. When I went to Zagreb, and that's when the Bosnian conflict was on. Then, wasn't a time. Now, when you look at Bosnia and how its doors are open for those to go and do Hijrah there, they're welcoming. So there are various places. If we're in Europe, Bosnia is absolutely beautiful. It's outstanding. If you see what is there, it's just amazing. It's amazing there, mashallah. So Hijrah, idealism. The reason I chose this title, because I felt that, is it an ideal now or is it a reality? And I hope that the audience, viewers, have seen that it is a reality in various parts, African continent, Europe, the Muslim countries I'm talking about, like Bosnia, for example. It is a reality. Some still say Turkey, for example, they will go to Turkey. I know some have gone to Turkey, mashallah, tabarakallah. Some still come to the Middle East, and there are challenges here in the Middle East, but there's still a reality. But one of the things we need to be really careful on is, yes, I've just said Turkey, my brother. I hope you heard me say that. Turkey as well, mashallah, is us coming out or traveling to those lands with an idealism that is misplaced. With an idealism that we're going to be moving into a land that's got its arms wide open to us, and we can just come and say, I am here as a muhajir, and we're not bringing anything to that society. We're not contributing anything to that society. We're just looking to take, because that's not going to be a formula for success. It just isn't. Okay, so we need to have an actualized understanding, which will, when we get here, that actualization will sink in. And believe me, once that actualization takes place, the comfort that you will feel that everything around you, by and large, to a greater extent, is religious, is
Islam,
founded upon deen, is Islam, to whatever degree. And you will be disappointed if you come with an idealism of the practice that you were doing in the abstract stages of your life, in the communities that you came from, where you became insular in your society, your environment, you became marginalized from wider society because you were practicing Islam so strongly that you were different from you'd broken away from the society, and everything was being done within that community, with the people that you were within that community, and you wanted to transpose that into a land that has been there a lot longer than the community that you come from, has been there a lot longer practicing Islam in various degrees to the land that you've come from. So we need to make sure that we're not looking through rose-tinted glasses at the reality of Hijrah.
Yeah.
Now, Khalid, I can't see you anymore.
I don't know. Can you hear me? Yeah, I don't know what happened. Something happened with the camera, but I guess it's a sign that it's time to go.
To conclude. And it's a nice picture anyway, Khalid.
Yeah,
so
and that's a real picture. That's a real picture of mine, by the way.
Mashallah,
from my hiking and stuff. So Seattle is also beautiful, not like Bosnia, but we got some pretty beautiful places in Washington.
But be careful, because you've already got one of them, our sisters, saying they want to do, after the description of Seattle, they want to do Hijrah to Seattle. So this may tempt them, this may tempt them even more.
Right.
But inshallah, look, I think now this is a time we will draw a close, inshallah, coming up to 1.5 hours again, as we always do. And I want to say Jazakallah khair, Brother Khalid. I think it's been a very engaging and insightful discussion. And I want to say Jazakumullah khair to our brothers and sisters for their contribution. And we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks for another session of the Doctor's Lab. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.